Poor people living on pensions are a nuisance. You should take care of her.
Right after our father's funeral, my brother pushed our physically disabled mother onto me.
Cut ties with that old woman and feel refreshed.
Even my brother's wife laughed, and I couldn't believe their nerves. After all, both of them had received plenty of care from our parents, yet now they're repaying that kindness with cruelty. But if I think about it, this might be lucky. Secretly smiling to myself, I took my mother's hand. My name is Abigail. I'm single and live on my own, but I used to live with my parents. The reason was that my father was ill and needed care, and my mother had mobility issues. However, when my brother Andrew married Savannah, my circumstances changed.
As the eldest son, I have responsibilities. So even after marriage, I plan to live at home. It's a way to honor our parents.
That's what Andrew said, and he and Savannah started living at our parents' house together. But then Andrew added,
You're a younger sister-in-law to Savannah. She's already considerate of me and our parents, so sorry, but having you around is a bit, you understand, right?
Though he seemed hesitant to say it aloud, his expression clearly conveyed that I was a bother. Despite this, I stayed at home for a while, enduring the cold treatment from Andrew and Savannah. Above all, I didn't want to show our parents the strained relationship between us. After leaving home, I entrusted my parents' care to Andrew and Savannah, but it worried me considerably. Andrew has always been self-centered, and I couldn't trust his claims of filial piety. As expected, whenever I asked Andrew or Savannah about our father's condition, they gave vague responses. Even straightforward questions that should have been answerable with proper caregiving were met with evasive replies. It became clear that they were pushing all the responsibility for our father's care onto our mother. One evening, after work, I rang the doorbell at our family home, intending to have a proper conversation. Andrew emerged from the entrance. It's too much for Mom to handle everything alone, especially with her mobility issues. If you're living together, you should share household chores and caregiving. But Andrew quickly retorted,
You know we both work. We're busy.
Even when I suggested living together again, or at least having me visit during the day to help, Andrew's mood soured. He raised his voice, saying,
You're annoying. Besides, you've always been cheeky. The nerve of someone who left to butt in.
Despite being practically kicked out by Andrew, his words still stung. I decided it was impossible to have a calm discussion with him. So, I retreated with my usual response, We'll talk about this another time. Occasionally, I tried to subtly address the issue with Savannah, Andrew's wife, but her reactions were equally harsh. She said,
What? After finally getting you out of here, you're still trying to interfere? Unbelievable.
Even though I hadn't made any unreasonable demands or used harsh language, I found myself portrayed as the villain. In the end, I was forbidden from speaking up, yet not allowed inside the house to help. It left me feeling frustrated and helpless. However, the problem doesn't end there. During a phone conversation with my mother, I learned that Andrew sometimes claims to be short on money and doesn't even provide basic living expenses. My mother said,
These tough economic times are dreadful. I'm worried.
But from my perspective, it seemed absurd. If they're too busy with work to help around the house, surely they can spare some living expenses? Or are they working at such a terrible company? Both of them? My mother remained non-committal, so I resolved to visit our family home again. Yet once more, I wasn't allowed inside. Andrew, who emerged from the entrance, maintained his intimidating demeanor.
Dad used to earn a high salary during his working years, and he had a substantial retirement fund. They can live comfortably without contributing to living expenses.
He said, unapologetically. I confronted him firmly. That's not the issue. Even savings and retirement funds deplete when used. Besides, how much is left, and at what rate are they spending it? Can you answer that? Andrew's annoyed expression prompted me to continue.
Fine, then you contribute the money. Otherwise, keep quiet. Now, go away.
His words revealed that his desire to be a dutiful child was merely a facade. In reality, he wanted to exploit our parents for household chores and financial support. Frustrated, I gave up trying to reason with Andrew and called our parents, suggesting they live separately. But my father's illness prevented him from pushing Andrew out, leaving the decision to my mother. Still, she refused to leave the family home, insisting on handling both household chores and caregiving.
I know we shouldn't spoil him further,
She said.
but if we kick him out, won't he cause trouble elsewhere? As the one who raised him, I should take responsibility.
I disagreed. No, that's not true. I grew up in the same environment. Andrew's behavior is his own responsibility. It's not your fault. My mother chuckled, seemingly unfazed.
Well, for now, apart from my mobility issues, I'm doing fine. If things get tough, I'll rely on you, Abigail.
And so, she continued to smile, completely unconcerned. Despite my efforts, even when I tried to give her living expenses directly instead of Andrew, she declined. It left me feeling helpless. Amidst all this, my father's health deteriorated, and before we knew it, he passed away. Despite her grief, my mother dutifully served as the chief mourner, and I did my best to support her. However, I couldn't help but notice Andrew and Savannah, who did nothing. Should I say something, as usual? But I knew they probably wouldn't listen. During the funeral, I remained silent. However, after bidding farewell to my father, an unexpected situation unfolded during a meal.
The funeral is over, and this poor pensioner is a nuisance. Abigail, you should take care of Mom.
Startled, I watched as Andrew tried to push my mother out.
Aw, finally rid of that bothersome old woman. It feels refreshing.
Even Savannah joined in, laughing. Their nerves were beyond belief. What are you saying? Don't you both realize how much you've relied on Mom? My anger seemed lost on them. To Andrew, I was just his younger sister, and my words didn't matter.
This house is mine now. So anyone I deem unnecessary should leave, right?
No, the house was in Dad's name, wasn't it? Even if you want the house and other inheritance, we need to discuss it properly. Andrew's shocking statements left me more bewildered than angry. What? What's going on? I asked. It turned out that Andrew had manipulated our ailing father, who lacked judgment, into transferring the house into his name. And the will stipulated that he'd receive all the other inheritance too. Exploiting him while he was vulnerable? I exclaimed.
Call it what you want. Results matter. Anyway, that's why Mom is now penniless. Just a burden.
We didn't want the sick old man in the house, let alone a disabled mother-in-law. Andrew agrees. So pack your bags and leave.
Savannah echoed Andrew's sentiments, and I felt a rage that shook me to my core. Looking at it another way, this might be lucky. I'd always thought Andrew and Savannah should live separately from our parents. Now that they were freeing my mother, perhaps this was an opportunity. Besides, I had my own worries, and maybe they could be resolved. My anger from moments ago vanished as I quietly said, "Well, I guess there's no other choice." We concluded that there was no need to speak with Andrew and Savannah anymore. After they left, my mother and I sat down for coffee. "Mom, if you leave this house, can you live with me?" I extended my hand, and she happily accepted. "Let's start by moving the essentials. Consider my apartment a temporary residence. Once we find a suitable place, we'll move." Given the stairs and steps in my apartment, it wasn't ideal for my mother's mobility. But she nodded in agreement. Then, she hesitated and made an unexpected proposal, one that surprised me. Still, I immediately agreed, believing it would ensure my mother's peace of mind. Later, we visited our family home together, and I informed Andrew and Savannah that I'd be taking care of my mother. Their joy knew no bounds. Having settled things quickly, we began packing my mother's belongings and preparing for the move. Andrew said,
Abigail must really have a soft spot for useless, poor old ladies.
With everything going his way, Andrew was grinning from ear to ear. The unhelpful Andrew couple just watched without lifting a finger, and that day my mother and I started living together, taking only the necessary items. For the large furniture we couldn't handle ourselves, we decided to hire professionals later. The next day, since I had a day off work and was tired from the move, I overslept a bit. When I woke up, I was surprised. I hadn't noticed because my phone was on silent mode, but Andrew and his wife had left numerous missed calls. Dozens of them, in fact. Just as I was overwhelmed by the unexpected volume, Andrew called again.
What's with that photo?
As soon as I pressed the answer key, I was met with a furious voice yelling at me, so I instinctively pulled the phone away from my ear. Is that the one I sent yesterday? In reality, when we moved, I took a photo of the view from our new place and sent it to Andrew. Since I didn't get an immediate response, I assumed they had gone to bed early or something. Andrew exclaimed,
I was shocked this morning. The message said it was your new home, but the view is from some ridiculously high place. There's no way you could take a photo like that anywhere other than a high-rise condo.
Did you figure it out? Actually, this place is owned by my mother. I surprised myself when I heard her say that. Andrew laughed, clearly thinking I was joking.
Come on, it's obvious you're making this up.
Ignoring his skepticism, I continued. After Dad's funeral, you kicked out Mom, who was living on a pension and had mobility issues. So when I suggested we live together, she invited me to her high-rise condo, and we moved in right away. Andrew retorted,
You're lying. There's no way that poor old lady owns such a luxurious place.
Maybe it was hard for him to believe, just as it was for me when Mom first told me. Andrew persisted.
Fine. That photo can't really be from your new place. You probably took it somewhere unrelated or found it online.
Since he refused to believe me, I reluctantly got permission from Mom and decided to invite Andrew and his wife to the high-rise condo's shared lounge. They wouldn't be allowed in unless residents invited them, so that should prove we live here. Andrew said,
That's what I wanted. I'll see it with my own eyes.
After ending the call, Andrew arrived at the place where we were waiting. Fortunately, there were no other users in the lounge at that moment, so we could talk quietly. Once inside, Andrew and his wife looked around with wide-open mouths, seemingly speechless. After seating them, I also took a chair. First, let me clarify something. Neither Andrew nor I knew this, but it turns out that our mother was actually quite wealthy. My mother added,
My father, your grandfather, left behind about $100,000. But since it wasn't money I earned myself, I felt embarrassed to talk about it.
Despite her embarrassment, my mother said she used that as a starting point for investments and managed to increase it. Even though she's my parent, I never realized how remarkable she was. Recently, she's been investing in real estate, and that's how she acquired this high-rise condo. The reason Andrew and his wife didn't need financial support from us was because of the rental income from the real estate. And the reason they didn't know about it was because our late father had sworn her to secrecy. My father had rented a house and only pretended to have money. He wasn't a high earner, and his retirement savings weren't substantial. While we enjoyed family trips and bought luxurious things, it was my mother who footed the bill. To make matters more complicated, or perhaps straightforward, my father had no intention of leaving an inheritance. He spent all his modest assets himself. So, practically speaking, there's almost no inheritance from Dad, I explained. Andrew, who had even written a will, realized it was all for naught and stood there dumbfounded.
But I already bought things, assuming I'd get an inheritance.
Savannah chimed in.
Our savings are practically non-existent. What are we going to do? And Andrew, you took out a loan to buy that luxury car.
Andrew retorted.
You splurged on designer bags and accessories too. Are your credit card payments okay?
As they suddenly started arguing, I exchanged glances with my mother, realizing that the conversation wasn't progressing. Then, with a start, they both turned toward us, closing in.
Right. If you have money, you should help us out, shouldn't you?
Andrew declared. Savannah added.
Of course. Besides, if you're wealthy, the situation changes. Let's live together again.
Andrew's forced smile and Savannah's unnatural, cloying voice made even my usually composed mother raise an eyebrow. Since I was tired of their nonsensical sleep talk, I decided to confront them with a reality they probably hadn't realized. Andrew, you seem to have forgotten, but if the family home was transferred to your name, there should be a gift tax to consider. Andrew froze at my words and muttered.
Tax.
It's likely to be higher than inheritance tax. If you don't believe me, look it up on your phone. Andrew scrambled to search. After a while, he exclaimed.
Oh!
Savannah blinked repeatedly, seemingly unable to tear her eyes away from the screen, and I looked like I might burst out laughing. Our family home is quite spacious, with a decent location, so the property taxes are substantial. A rough estimate suggests it could be over $10,000. And since it's an old house, finding a buyer might be challenging. Andrew protested.
Why do you keep saying weird things?
Even if you demolish it and sell only the land, it'll still cost a significant amount. It's quite a hassle, isn't it? I smiled at Andrew and Savannah, who were sweating nervously. I had known this all along, and when my father passed away, I had considered renouncing the inheritance altogether. But Andrew's selfish actions resulted in them taking on everything, which turned out to be lucky for me. While I beamed, Andrew and his wife turned pale. Savannah sighed.
Can't you find another solution?
I can't think of anything, I replied, puzzled. All I can suggest is... Andrew interrupted.
What?
Don't try to evade taxes. Penalties will only increase the amount you owe. It's better to sell your prized brand items and pay the taxes quietly. Despite my sincere advice, it wasn't the satisfactory answer they wanted. They frowned and looked dissatisfied. Andrew pleaded.
Come on, help us out. We're family.
His usual authoritative demeanor had vanished, replaced by desperation. Savannah turned pleading eyes toward me. Watching them, I sighed deeply. Who was it that kicked out this family? Even Andrew faltered at my pointed remark. If Andrew and his wife had shown a cooperative family spirit, I might have been willing to contribute financially, at least partially covering the gift tax. But expecting help only when they were in trouble after abandoning my sick father and even my mother was too much. My mother chimed in.
For you too, I'm just a useless, poor woman, right? So there's nothing I can do.
Her gentle tone belied her unwavering resolve. It was a smile that conveyed both softness and unyielding determination. Andrew implored.
Mom, please. It's a lifelong request. Help us out.
Savannah added.
We'll treat you well from now on. Please let go of the past.
Despite Andrew and Savannah's pitiful expressions, my mother remained steadfast, shaking her head. So, the conversation is over. It's time for you to leave. Andrew protested.
Wait! Ask Abigail to talk to Mom too. We're in a dire situation.
My family consists only of Mom. When you kicked us out, the bond was severed. Shall I call security if you won't leave? Realizing our determination, Andrew looked crestfallen, and Savannah collapsed weakly to the floor. They were so shocked that they couldn't move, so we had the security guards escort them out. Afterward, Andrew and his wife sold all their luxury items to pay the gift tax, but their savings were wiped out. With mismatched income and hefty property taxes, they struggled to make ends meet. Andrew, desperate for help, tried to break into the high-rise condo to see Mom, but the guards promptly removed him. He even got arrested for resisting. Although Andrew was released soon after, they couldn't adjust their lifestyle, accumulating debt until they disappeared without a trace. I no longer cared about their fate. I moved furniture from the apartment to the high-rise condo, and Mom bought everything new. We now live happily every day in this barrier-free environment, perfect for my mobility-challenged mother. Seeing her content face, I vowed to continue being a devoted daughter.
I hope you enjoyed this story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Let's see you again in the next video.